She bent down in the sand, her hands trembling as she picked up broken seashells scattered along the beach. To everyone else, she was just another village girl with wind-tangled hair and bare feet. But to anyone who looked closely, her eyes carried a weight, one carved by years of struggle, of watching dreams slip through her fingers like the tide that lapped at her ankles. Her name was Amara. The war had taken nearly everything: her father, her older brother, the home that once smelled of firewood and laughter. Left behind were her mother and a younger sister, both relying on her strength. But what nobody knew, not even her own family, was that Amara carried a hidden skill, a secret passed down by her father before he was lost to the fighting. He had been a hunter, a man of patience and precision. And when she was just 12, he had placed an old, battered rifle in her hands and told her, "The world doesn't care how small you are. But a bullet will always listen if you can guide it." Now, years later, that lesson echoed in her heart. On that dusty shoreline, while she searched for shells to sell at the market, the rhythmic crunch of boots behind her broke her thoughts. She turned and froze. A group of foreign soldiers was standing nearby, their uniforms heavy with dust and their rifles gleaming under the sun. They weren't just ordinary soldiers, they were special forces, elite, hardened men whose eyes scanned every horizon with suspicion. Among them was a tall sniper, his rifle strapped across his chest, his gaze sharp and unyielding. He had been watching her. "You," he called out, his voice steady. "You know how to shoot." Amara blinked, clutching the shells tighter. "No," she said quickly. I picked these." The sniper smirked, a glint of challenge in his eyes. He walked closer, holding out a single bullet between his fingers. "I don't believe that. There's something in the way you look at things, like you measure distance without knowing. I'll bet you couldn't even hit that ridge out there." Amara followed his gesture. Far beyond the rolling dunes, almost invisible in the haze, was a ridge. Later she would learn the exact distance: 3,294 meters. Nearly 2 miles. A shot even most trained snipers would never attempt. The men around him laughed. One nudged another. "Come on, Captain, even we couldn't hit that. And you want the girl to try." But the sniper's eyes stayed locked on Amara. He wasn't mocking her. He was testing something. Amara's heart pounded. She should have walked away. She was nobody. Just a girl gathering shells to keep her family alive. But something inside her stirred. A whisper from her father's voice, from every evening they had spent in the fields together, aiming at distant bottles until her shoulder bruised and her patience grew sharper than steel. She set the shells down. "Give me the rifle." The laughter died instantly. The sniper arched an eyebrow, intrigued, and handed her the weapon. It was heavier than anything she had ever touched, but her hands found their place naturally, like they had been waiting for this very moment. She lay flat on the sand, pressing her cheek against the cold stock, and stared through the scope. The world shrank into a single breath. Her father had taught her more than just how to pull a trigger. He taught her to feel the wind's whisper, to read the shimmer of heat in the air, to wait until silence filled her body so that her heartbeat would not disturb her aim. She adjusted, calculated, and steadied herself. The soldiers watched in silence. Even the sniper crossed his arms, his smirk fading as curiosity grew. And then, the shot rang out. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, but her eyes never blinked. The bullet tore across the endless stretch of air. Nearly 3.5 kilometers of impossible distance. Seconds stretched into eternity until finally, a small puff of dust exploded from the ridge. She had hit the mark. The silence that followed was louder than the gunshot. The soldiers stared at her, their mouths slightly open. The sniper finally let out a low whistle. "Well," he muttered, almost to himself, "looks like we just found the one person crazy enough to beat me at my own game." But Amara wasn't smiling. As the echoes of the shot faded, so did the rush of adrenaline. She gently placed the rifle down and looked at the soldiers. "I don't want bets," she said softly. "I just want my family safe." The sniper studied her, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. "Then maybe we can help each other." From that day, everything changed. The special forces didn't leave her behind. They saw her as more than a girl collecting shells. She became their ally, their quiet shadow in a land where trust was scarce. They trained her, yes, but more often than not, it was she who surprised them, teaching patience, showing them how to read the land with instincts honed by survival, not manuals. There were battles, nights of fire and fear, mornings where the weight of what she carried nearly broke her. But each time she lifted that rifle, she remembered her father's words, "A bullet will always listen if you can guide it." And she guided it not for glory, not for recognition, but for the hope that her little sister might grow up in a world where the only shells worth collecting were the ones from the sea. By the end of their deployment, the sniper who had once mocked her no longer saw a fragile girl. He saw a warrior, someone forged by pain but unbroken by it. When they parted ways, he pressed a coin into her hand, engraved with the insignia of his unit. "You're one of us," he told her quietly. "Never forget that." Amara never did. Years later, villagers would tell stories of the girl who could split the horizon with a single shot, who had stood shoulder to shoulder with soldiers far stronger and far more trained than her. But if you ever asked Amara, she would only smile faintly and say, "I was just picking up shells, until someone dared me to aim higher."